Hi everyone, welcome to Life Happens. My name is Bonnie and I am so grateful to be able to be here and sharing with you guys tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I am a mother and a grandmother and a law enforcement officer and an author, hi Ashlyn, and a speaker and the president and founder of a not-for-profit program geared towards youth who are showing at-risk behaviors. In my agency for the last 6 years, I've been working in youth relations, and most recently, before the pandemic, I was assigned to a high school with around 2,000 students. And this week, as I was thinking about everything that's happening, in 2019, some incredibly intelligent individuals or individual had the genius idea of creating a social media page called something to the effect of Florida Fights 2019, which had students everywhere wanting to achieve their 3 seconds of fame by being able to post the coolest fight on the page. And this, of course, caused, hi Chris, caused some of our students to become really antagonistic. Hi Scott. And for a little while, it seemed as if we were having fights almost every day, and sometimes even more than one a day. And as I was arresting these students and processing these students, I found myself talking to them about how they had been nothing more than someone's entertainment. And the people who were getting their kicks, hi Nick, who were getting their kicks from posting the videos, well, those people were not going to be around to work the community service hours or to deal with any other consequences that the fighting might have brought into their lives. Hi Jim and Patty. Most of the time, the people that were involved in the fights were nothing more than puppets or pawns in somebody else's game, and as soon as the fight was over and the video was posted, the people who were encouraging all the fights cut ties and were moving on to their next victim. So as I've been watching all the violence and destruction that's happening in our country and as it all unfolds, I feel like basically it's the same as what was happening at the high school, just at a much larger and more twisted scale. And it is incredibly sad and frustrating for me to watch. And my heart hurts when I see people getting their kicks out of videotaping and watching other people physically hurt people. Hi, George. To me, it's really sad. So as I think about all of this, I have to wonder what's happening to respect. I recall a situation that I had with my son when he was around 13 or 14. Hi, Mike. When he was around 13 or 14 years old, there was this adult male who was an authority figure in his life, and this adult felt the need to constantly belittle my son, and the man would get in my son's face and call him names and regularly antagonize him into attempting to fight him. And knowing the law the way that I did, I understood that there was nothing lawfully that could be done about the situation. And I also knew that if my son ever retaliated to this person the way that the man encouraged him to, hi Stephen, the way the man encouraged him to, my son would be seen as the person at fault and his future would be changed forever. So my son and I talked about this often, and I explained to him that the treatment he was receiving was not healthy and it wasn't right. And this person that was doing this to him was not worth him throwing his future away over. And I would remind my son regularly that no matter what this person did or said or did, my son needed to keep his cool and address this man with yes sir and no sir, and my son was never to ever physically touch this person. I taught my son that the way this person treated him was a reflection of that man's heart and not a reflection of my son. But the way my son responded would be a reflection of who he was. It was really painful to watch my child find his way through this difficult time. And but I knew as I watched it happen, I knew someday that this would serve him well wherever his future was taking him. Now, my son is in the Army. He is a Ranger and in Special Forces combat medic training, and he's just doing great. And I feel as if my son's experience with this person has helped prepare him to deal with difficult people and perform under pressure. In my work in law enforcement, I constantly witness disrespect at all ends of the spectrum. And my takeaway from it all is there's a major breakdown in how we value ourselves and value each other. And we seem to be spending way too much time taking the behavior of others personally. And when I'm dealing with difficult kids or teenagers, usually if I have the opportunity to meet their parents, within 1 or 2 minutes I can figure out why that child is so difficult. So, but the times that I do get to really sit down and talk to the kids about them having to deal with difficult adults or other kids that are treating them badly or disrespecting them, I try to get them to see the difficulties they are dealing with as nothing more than a training opportunity for their future. Difficult people are a part of our life. Throughout life, we have bosses that will be that we completely disagree with. We'll have bosses that are just simply difficult in general. There will be difficult customers or difficult Hi, Steve, thank you. Difficult instructors or simply people on the street that are just difficult in general. There's no way to avoid difficult people or difficult situations. But my thought process is that the respect we show others, regardless of how they treat us, is not as much about our respect for them as it is about our respect for ourselves and our lives and our future. My son, the one that I was just talking about, one of my favorite stories that he has told me, or he shared with me since he's been in the military, is about a night when him and his buddies were downtown, and they're in the city where he lived, and they were going out to the bar, and while they were at the bar, they noticed this one guy who was with a group of girls. And throughout the night, my son and his friends watched this guy being harassed by another group of guys. And finally, my son and his friends got sick of watching the guys harass the other guy and decided to step in. Of course, I wasn't there, and I don't know all the details, but I guess it turned into some big mess. And at one point, one of the guys who was doing the harassing decided to come up to my son and punch him in the face. Well, after my son took this punch with barely a flinch, he looks at the guy and says, "You punch like a bitch," and he walked away. And his friends that were with him still to this day talk about how cool it was that my son was able to do that. And I think that story was way cooler than hearing my son call me and tell me, "Hey mom, I got in a fight and got arrested and completely screwed up my future." So I have a lot more respect for a man that is able to respond the way that my son did in this situation than one that feels the need to prove himself. So when I go into 5th grade classrooms and I teach them different lessons, one of the lessons that we teach it talks about effective communication. And it goes over the differences between communicating in an unsure way, in a demanding way, and in a competent way. And we explain to kids that when someone is communicating in a way that is unsure, the way that they're talking shows a lack of confidence and makes it seem as if they don't know what they're talking about. And then a person that is being demanding typically uses fear and intimidation to get their point across, and they're aggressive and they don't care about how anybody else feels. But when we're able to communicate confidently, we stand up straight, shoulders back, look the person in the eyes, speak clear and calm, and be respectful to everyone involved. When I teach this, I talk about how I've learned that when we're unsure of ourselves, it shows a lack of respect for ourselves. And when someone is being demanding, not only do they appear to have no respect for themselves, but they clearly have no respect for anyone else. But when we are able to communicate confidently, we are not only taking everyone else's feelings into consideration, but we are thinking about the moment, or we're thinking beyond the moment and respecting ourselves and respecting our future. So I have been working in law enforcement for 20 years, and as I was preparing this, I realized that I spent the first 10 years of my career learning how I had lived the majority of my life as an unsure person who allowed demanding people to dominate my life. And then once I became aware of how dysfunctional my life was, I spent the next 10 years learning about what brought me there and finding my confidence and making sure I had the tools I needed to keep it. And when this was all brought to my attention, it was kind of scary how clear-cut the timeline was. But our ability to change our lives only comes when we become aware there's a problem. And once we know there is a problem, we have to accept our responsibility for either allowing the problem or not allowing the problem in our lives. And then we have to accept our responsibility of what we need to do in correcting the problem. Our lives and our future are our responsibility. So all of this I was thinking about 2 years ago, this past February, on a 19-year-old boy walked into a school and he killed 17 people and he injured 17 others. And this caused this major uproar about guns. People began screaming about guns, blaming the guns, wanting to hire more people to carry guns to protect people from the guns. I grew incredibly frustrated with the reactionary response to a problem that goes much deeper than where the guns are. And after the shooting, through the knowledge I had gained and in my training and experiences, I began putting everything I could into creating a not-for-profit program for youth who are showing at-risk behaviors, because I understand how violent crimes typically stem from something much deeper that begins long before the crime ever occurs. So these days, I've been listening to people scream about systematic racism. I'm pretty sure this is a term that everyone seems to know it, but I don't think I ever heard it before any of this happened. And if I'm honest, I have an extremely difficult time believing systematic racism is much of an issue, but thanks to all of this, I now know that over the last few years, I have been increasingly frustrated with a systematic problem. In my opinion, it is more a systematic cycle issue than a systematic racial issue. Our system is primarily responsive. It's responsive to what may occur or what has already occurred, as opposed to being preventative to what is likely to occur. Adverse childhood experiences studies has revealed how our experiences as children tremendously impact future violence, victimization, perpetration, lifelong health and opportunity issues, and oppression. When someone is born into dysfunction, they are born with an emotional and physiological handicap that has the ability to worsen or heal depending on their environment and their influences, which they themselves as children have no control over. So saying all this does not excuse all of the morbid behaviors that are affecting our society, but it does explain where more often than not these actions are coming from, and this should help us to understand how to help break these unhealthy cycles. I believe all of this comes back to valuing life. I get so sick of hearing this life matters and that life matters, and I'm sorry if I'm offending you, but I want to be honest. A couple of years ago, I was working a football game and I was directing traffic. We stop the traffic so people can cross the road, and if you know me, you know that I love doing that. I enjoy interacting with the people and getting them to smile and helping them to have a good night. And so as I was doing this at one of the football games, that was like when the whole Black Lives Matter movement first started a couple years ago. A group of Black people were coming across the road, and I was welcoming them and interacting with them, and they were ignoring me. But apparently this was noticeable enough for someone else to yell out, "Blue Lives Matter." And that frustrated me. I shot back at them and said, "All lives matter." I know the response was only because they didn't agree with how I was being treated, but I felt like their response has a potential to be antagonistic, and I don't agree with everyone's willingness to divide us. My ability to break the unhealthy cycle of adversity in my own life only came when I began to know and understand my own value. And if I'm completely honest, this understanding did not really sink in until I started wanting to know more about God. I used to believe that God was a demanding God, that he used intimidation and fear to get what he wanted from us. And as I was preparing for this tonight, I thought it was funny that when I looked up the Bible verses about fearing God to help me explain why I felt this way, I Googled Bible verses about fearing God, and I read one of the results that had 32 Bible verses about fear of God. And reading them now with the understanding I have, I didn't see the fear the same way that I used to. So Psalm 112:1 says, "How blessed is the man who fears the Lord." And Proverbs 19:23 says, fear of the Lord leads to life. And Luke 1:30 says, "And his mercy is upon generation after generation towards those who fear him." Ooh, my notes went crazy. The word fear jacked up my entire image of God. I had dealt with enough fear in my life that the last thing I wanted was to add more fear into it. Then one day, as it was being explained to me that the word fear, when the Bible talks about fearing God, was one of the words that was kind of lost its meaning in translation. When the Bible talks about fearing God, it is not talking about the unhealthy, demanding fear that comes with dysfunction and intimidation. It's talking about a healthy, reverent fear that comes with respect and love. As a child of God, he doesn't want us to be scared of him. It's more like a fear of letting him down because we love and respect him so much. But again, a better understanding of this comes with a better understanding of the way he values us, and in turn, the way we should value ourselves. So John 3:16 says, "God so loved the world that he gave his only son." John 1:12 says, "Those who welcome him," Jesus, "those who believe in Jesus' name, he authorizes to become God's children." Matthew 18:11 through 15 says, "Jesus has come to give life to anyone who is lost." Think of it this way. If a man owns 100 sheep and one lamb wanders away and is lost, won't he leave the 99 grazing on the hillside and go and thoroughly search for the one lost lamb? And if he finds his lost lamb, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 who are safe. Now you should understand that it's never the desire of your heavenly Father that a single one of these humble believers should be lost. It doesn't matter how lost you are. It doesn't matter how broken you are. It doesn't matter how far away you are. God is chasing after you and searching for you to bring you to him. But with respect comes discipline. Almost everything I have ever read about success in anything talks about self-discipline being a necessary part of the equation. In Proverbs 12:1, it says, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates corruption is stupid." No, sorry, whoever hates correction is stupid. I thought it was funny that it said you're stupid, but anyway. Proverbs 10:17 says, "Whoever heeds discipline shows the way to life, but whoever ignores correction leads others astray," which we are seeing others led astray all over the planet at the moment. And then one of my favorites is 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us the spirit of fear or timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline." So having self-control and self-discipline because you respect yourself and your future is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of wisdom and power and strength. But again, these qualities are learned either as a child or gained and self-taught as an adult. It used to be that law enforcement was the last resort. People called us in a true life or death emergency, or when all else failed, or a crime was had obviously occurred. Now we get calls when 7-year-old little Johnny refuses to go to school, or because Susie won't leave the classroom like she was told and she's being disrespectful and rude. And parents are afraid to discipline, and schools aren't allowed to discipline. So when law enforcement is a person's only form of discipline, of course they're going to hate us and blame us for all their problems. On the same token, when you have parents and teachers cussing at their children, you can't be shocked and bothered when those children show the same lack of respect that they have received. I about had a stroke a couple years ago when some brilliant therapist came out with a study that says that children need 1 day a week where all they hear is yes. To me, clearly that person has never raised a child or hasn't really been involved with raising a child. But anyway, discipline and boundaries, structure, stability is all a part of a healthy love that creates a foundation of trust and respect inside a person. A person's ability to communicate with others really all comes back to their overall self-worth and self-confidence. All of that being said, I also talk to kids about how there are times that being demanding becomes necessary when someone refuses to cooperate with authority, especially when safety is an issue. Effective communication goes completely out the window when we are dealing with someone who is intoxicated or irrational or both. A line I used to use a lot with people when they were really frustrating me is, "I will treat you with respect right up until you give me a reason not to." Not because I was trying to be, hi Maureen, not because I was trying to be intimidating, but because I have a job to do and not everyone is cooperative in that process. If confident communication is not working, especially when safety is a factor, sometimes we need to be demanding in an effort to keep everyone safe. It's nothing personal. It's just that there are parts of our job that have nothing to do with what we want to do and everything to do with what we are called to do. The public may be able to say that they don't want to be involved in certain situations, but as a law enforcement officer, we don't have that luxury. We have a duty to act, and like it or not, the behavior of others influences the way that we respond. Changing the world means taking a look inward before we start pointing fingers outward. It means not being afraid to take responsibility for our part in all of this. It means getting to the heart of the brokenness and empowering ourselves and others to just be better. It means and want to do better. It means building each other up, not tearing each other down. Gandhi said it best when he said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Jesus says they will know we are God's children by their love. Or by our love, sorry. Show the world how much you love them. Show the world how much you love yourself by loving others. I don't know, be the change you want to see in the world. I love you all. I thank you so much for joining me. I'm really glad you are here, and I hope you have a fantabulous week. Bye.